Good morning. This is Jackie Thornton with Leading Age Georgia and the Georgia Institute on Aging. We welcome you to this webinar series that is going to be presented by Catherine Futch. And I want to ask everyone if they would please mute your line by pressing *6. This webinar series is brought to you by our sustaining sponsors. And I want to go ahead and turn over the conference and webinar to Catherine Futch. And thank you again, Catherine, for sharing your insight on elder-family disputes and how we can manage difficult conversations.
Thank you, everyone, and good morning. Really appreciate your joining us for the last of our 3 scheduled webinars. It seems like they've all gone by in a big hurry. Today we're going to focus on elder disputes. As we all know, being part of a family can be wonderful. It can be frustrating, can make you feel joy and make you feel defeated. But at the end of the day, it still is true. Families, we can't live with them and we can't live without them. My primary resource for this webinar is Mom Always Liked You Best, Guide for Resolving Family Feuds, Inheritance Battles, and Elder Career Crises by Arlene Cardasis, Rick Larson, Crystal Thorpe, and Blair Tripp. It's published by Elder Decisions, a division of Agreement Resources. And I want to make one important point. The examples I'm focusing around are those that involve family settings and disputes with elders. But it's important for you to know that the things that we talk about can be used as you work to resolve any dispute with an elder and do it effectively in almost any setting and with almost any kind of elder dispute. So, today's new reality. We're seeing a dramatic increase in adult family conflicts. Many adult siblings are having a difficult time as they face their parents' aging and related decisions regarding caregiving, health care, property distributions, estate planning, and more. It's now common for us to live at a distance from our aging parents and siblings. And the above can and does lead to a breakdown in family communications and increased conflict over important, often critical family decisions. The most common triggers of family conflict or elder disputes are asset distribution, including homes, land, antiques, artwork, and more. I'll tell you when to move the slide, so move it back one if you would. Caregiving for elderly family members, old relationship patterns and unhealed wounds that are still being worked out among siblings and between parents and their adult children, geographic distribution and infrequent communication, and sibling wealth disparity. Caregiving responsibilities are a major source of family conflict. In the United States alone, over 43 million people serve as unpaid caregivers of adults who are 50 years or older, involving about 1/4 or more of U.S. households. That comes from Caregiving in the U.S. 2009. This report revealed that over 30% of the caregivers provide care for 5 years or more, and while the majority of caregivers are women, at least 1/3 of them are men. While approximately 80% of us have siblings, often most of us feel we're shouldering this awesome responsibility alone. American adults are now living on average until age 78, 3 decades longer than they did a century ago, and many are living past 90. So we'll advance. So being in conflict with someone is tough, especially when the conflict is with or between family members, and most especially if it includes elder members of your family. When you're engaged in dispute, you can feel lost, as if you're on a journey you can't control. Navigating from where you are to where you want to be is almost impossible because others seem to keep putting up roadblocks. Not only that, everyone in your family seems to be coming from a different place, which means there's no consensus on what your final destination should be. So, how does a family find its way? How does a caregiver or other find its way in the process of dealing with disputes? Cardasis, Larson, Thorpe, and Tripp have developed a conflict resolution, GPS. It's a tool that can provide you with a system for understanding where you are, how you got there, and ultimately where you want to go. This tool can be used for your own family issues, or it can be used for elder family disputes as part of your work. And by the way, GPS stands for Guiding Positions to Settlement. Advance. You could advance it. Consider the following family dispute. 2 sisters, Ellen and Susan, have been sharing the cost of maintaining the old family vacation house on Cape Cod for 5 years, since Dad finished gifting the property to them equally and retaining a third interest for himself. Dad is not able to make the trip from his New Hampshire home to the Cape anymore. Ellen wants to sell the house or have Susan buy her out. She lives in Florida and rarely, if ever, brings her family there. On the other hand, Susan is adamant that the house should be kept in the family, and she claims that she cannot afford to buy Ellen out. Susan uses the house every summer and is furious that Ellen wants to sell the old place. Dad is ready to redo his estate plan, and he's worried about this ongoing dispute concerning the house. Nobody is sure what outcome he would prefer, but everyone is keenly aware of how deeply saddened he is by the conflict. It's troubling to him to see his two daughters at odds, and he is upset that the gift of this wonderful house is turning into a family nightmare. He wants Ellen and Susan to figure it out and let him know their plan. He says that he will not try to influence the outcome. Really, he just wants them to get along so he doesn't feel caught in the middle. So let's use this dispute to consider how the conflict resolution GPS can help navigate from positions to solutions. Conflict resolution GPS will reveal through a 3-step process how you and others arrive at and get stuck in your own conclusions. The 3 steps are observations, internal processing, interpretations, and drawing conclusions, taking a stand. For observations, the world provides us with infinite information from which we consciously and unconsciously select what we will actually take in, our data points. We select what seems important, or what has captured our attention, and we move on from there. To figure out how we got to our conflicting conclusions in a dispute, we need to first consider exactly what information we have each observed and chosen as reliable. That's the first step. And then we have to process, so internal processing interpretations. Once we take in our selected observations, we pass them through our own personal editing system, which works subconsciously using our past experiences, knowledge, biases, assumptions, fears, values, needs, and desires. With our personal editing system, we interpret our selected observations. That is the second step. And then the third, drawing conclusions and taking a stand. Taking a stand, that is our position. And it is often where we find ourselves at odds with family members and others. Our conclusions are the results of steps 1 and 2. Because our selected positions make complete sense to us and are often viewed as non-negotiable, it's not surprising that conversations become so difficult. We find it virtually impossible to reconcile where each of us is and where we want to go because, like us, they took seemingly logical steps to form their own independent conclusions. So if you would advance. So let's look at Ellen's processes. Her observations. Ellen has not been in Cape Cod for 8 years. The kids barely remember the place. She lives on a beach in Florida, goes to her cabin in North Carolina mountains for summer vacations. Susan, on the other hand, brings her family to the old house on weekends throughout the year and sometimes stays as long as 3 weeks. Ellen knows the house is owned free and clear, believes it should be worth a bit over $1 million, and figures her share to be at least $333,000. Her kids are approaching college years. She doesn't have much of a nest egg as the market downturn was a disaster for her. So she's worried. So out of all of that, she does her internal processing. To her, it's completely unfair to continue to pay taxes and upkeep for property she doesn't really use. Funding her sister's vacations doesn't seem right to her. She believes fairness means something closer to equal usage, and there's no need for the house. She wants her money out of it. Step 3, drawing to conclusions and taking a stand. Sell the house or buy her out. Ellen's interpretations. She needs money. The only way she can imagine getting any value from the house is to sell her share, and the current situation is unfair. Giving up her share makes perfect sense to her. She feels she's been very thoughtful, generous, and appropriate, and it is all very logical. Who could argue with that? So we can advance. Let's look at Susan's process. Step 1, her observations. Susan's fondest memories are tied to the beach house. She was very close to her mom. She spent many summers there and even got married at the beach house. Ellen complains about money but seems to live well. Susan has not forgotten she helped Ellen relocate to Florida after she lost her job. It's true, Ellen rarely uses the house, and she's considered the possibility of buying her out, but she's not sure she could pull it off. Her internal processing and interpretation, step 2. Susan thought of selling the house. The thought of selling the house makes Susan cry. She thought her children would get married there. It would be devastating to Dad if the house was sold. And Ellen can use the house anytime she wants to. The fact that Ellen doesn't use the house doesn't make Susan responsible for paying Ellen's share or buying her out. Ellen can't sell without Susan's agreement to do so. The ongoing fight is unpleasant and exhausting. Susan feels she's always been the one to pick up the pieces for Ellen, and she's tired of it. Drawing conclusions, step 3, taking a stand. Susan concludes the house must not be sold under any circumstances. It must be kept in the family. She doesn't currently have the funds to buy her sister out, and keeping the house makes perfect sense to her. Her interpretations. Her sister can use the house anytime she wants to. Selling it would be traumatic to her dad, and of course her children will want to get married there. Advance. So, armed with their conclusions, Susan and Ellen talk, and they've been talking for some time, working through the things they're beginning to realize about each other and each other's intentions. And following is just the final moments of a lengthy series of conversations they had. Ellen, it never occurred to me that you would be willing to manage summer rentals. But Susan, the other piece of this is I'd like to get my money out. You know that. Susan, yes, I do. But here's what I'd like you to consider. Dad says he doesn't care what we decide, but I believe he would be heartbroken if we sold the house. I'm wondering if you would consider holding on and not forcing the sale as long as Dad is alive. I have some ideas for improvements on the property that would increase its value. Ellen, so you're suggesting we turn the house into a source of income and that we hold on to it for its future value. What makes you think this will work? They continue to talk as they work out their issues, and ultimately they agree on Susan's proposal and begin to demonstrate that they are starting to act like a team and are in a much better place to approach Dad and have a productive conversation as a family. Advance. Finding the path from impasse to resolution is one of the most important things that you can offer your clients, no matter your role. It is an ability to help them think about their interests, including their needs, wishes, aspirations, fears, and concerns from their particular positions. Positions are their conclusions, their opinions, their one proposed solution, their non-negotiables, and the like. Positions are also our conclusions. They are clear and definite. Interests are what lie below, why we feel the way we do, why they support our positions. When someone has a position, respectfully ask them why they feel that way. The answer to the why question will become the basis of the solutions you can develop together. To separate a position from an interest, think about the why in every position statement. For example, if you believe Mom needs to stop driving right away, you should be asking yourself why. You've seen the dents in her car. You were horrified when she admitted getting lost driving home last week. The interest that will emerge may include Mom's safety, your own kid's safety when she drives them around, and your responsibility to the community. And if you're completely honest with yourself, you may also admit you're tired of dealing with this and you just want all the worry to go away. Your sister Amanda may, on the other hand, feel Mom is fine driving. So you ask her to help you understand what her thoughts are. What has she observed? What concerns does she have regarding the dents and Mom getting lost? If you make these inquiries respectfully and in a genuinely curious manner, Amanda may reveal that she has seen the dents but doesn't want to upset Mom by asking her about them, although she knows something is wrong. She may also indicate that, like you, she can't imagine how Mom can manage her full life without her car. Once you both realize you have common interests around Mom's safety, happiness, and independence, you can start working together to create a workable plan for her transportation needs. Advance. Active listening skills are critical. The goals of active listening are these: to fully understand others' interests, to create trust, to show respect, to allow others to tell their story and vent their emotions, to provide a safe environment that encourages others to think about and reveal their interests, and ultimately to foster creative problem solving. If you can actively listen, it will be easier to help others resolve their disputes. There are 10 instruments for productive conversations, and we're going to go through these on these next slides. Advance. The first one is known as the conversation booster. It's the greatest tool for peace building. A question or a comment that has no hidden agenda but certainly has an important purpose. It's simply an invitation to someone to tell you more about whatever they wish to talk about. Conversations boosters are usually short. What else? Really? Why? Tell me more. Go on, I'm listening. Nearly always it's taken as a welcome sign of genuine curiosity, and the message you give, you've got the floor, I want to hear everything. These little conversation boosters are gems that encourage others to elaborate, add additional details, and express emotions. They can ultimately be all that is needed for people to honestly speak about their underlying interests. The goal of these inquiries is to focus on interest, on what is really important to someone else and why. After you have uncovered someone's interest, I care about Mom being safe, and of course I want her to be happy, then you'll be ready to talk about proposals for resolution. The second is acknowledging and showing appreciation. The goal is to let the other person know that you realize that they're angry or they're sad or they're fearful. Show empathy, not necessarily agreement, but empathy. I can see that you're frustrated with me, and I know that this situation has been hard on you. Once you're able to empathize, you can begin to have a discussion that uncovers interest. Expressing your appreciation for someone's participation in a difficult conversation can go a really long way toward building trust. Appreciation can be very powerful as long as it's offered sincerely. After you tell someone that you can see how upset they are with you, be sure to resist the urge to justify your actions with, but I don't think it's as bad as you are making it out to be. This will only erase the good you accomplished when you acknowledge their emotions. Reflecting emotions and acknowledging others' difficulties sets a tone of respect. It shows that you're open to understanding their feelings. It also lets others know that you have been paying careful attention and that you're invested in the process. The rewards for you will come later. Advance. The third is asking clarifying questions. After you have encouraged someone to tell you what's on his mind, you can show that you are truly curious about his interest by asking for details. How? When? Or where? Hold on firmly to your curiosity since it can often elicit important information. But a caution. Paul, listen to this statement. Paul, I hear how upset you are. Can you tell me what in particular seems unfair to you? I am also interested in fairness, and I want to be sure that you and I are sharing the same information. It's important that you don't interrogate or try to corner him or tell him he's being ridiculous. Try not to put him on the defensive. Summarizing frequently. Sometimes conversations can get stuck, bogged down, everyone feels stuck, and there seems to be nowhere to go. By summarizing what you heard from others, you can often release the jam and get things moving again. When you summarize, give everyone the chance to hear their own statements so they know that you got it. Ask, did I get everything right? Once everyone agrees the summary was correct, this often sets the stage for moving the conversation forward. You can advance. Reframing to turn down the heat and shed more light. Things can get pretty intense in family discussions. Sometimes accusations, blame, perceived motives, and insults can take over the conversation. Reframing becomes your most nuanced, active listening skill. Example, your sister Ann says, Arthur is such a micromanager, telling me how to better care for Mom all the time. I'm not his employee, and he can't treat me like his lackey. He has no idea of all I do. To reframe, it might be helpful if you said, it sounds like you want to be acknowledged for what you do every day for Mom. You'd like to figure out a way for Arthur to understand and appreciate what you do and to trust you more. Reframe goes directly to Ann's interest. She wants acknowledgement, respect, and trust, and along the way, you sidestep the insulting comments about Arthur and refocus the conversation onto Ann's interests. Using technology wisely. Technology can be a double-edged sword. You can make communication more effective, but it can also make it more complicated, especially if the elder doesn't know how to use the technology correctly. Using emails, for example, that others say they never received or don't know how to respond to, or using text messages others don't know how to open or respond to. Advance. 7, introducing optimism to move the conversation forward. Using optimism to move the conversation forward implies hope. Acknowledge trust issues or anger or fear, but ask others to look at what you have already achieved together. Another option is to ask others to think about what you've done well in the past. It can also be helpful to remind family members of their common interests, which might include fairness. Re-identify your common interests frequently when the discussion gets bogged down. And then for 8, using transparency to build trust. Transparency, or being very open about your own goals, thoughts, and feelings, can be really effective in developing trust when it is followed up with constant use of active listening skills. While transparency builds trust, it takes time and consistency to be as effective as it overall will be. Advance. Using and instead of but. There is a simple concept that can be a marvelously effective tool. I understand how that happened, but you should have known that Mom would get upset. But is the big eraser. It erases the benefit gained by a statement of understanding and builds off what was said before. I understand that you were stuck in traffic, which was beyond your control, and I wish you'd thought to call me so I could pick up Mom instead of leaving her waiting. And 10, avoiding toxic questions and comments. Don't circulate negative comments. Don't attribute motives. Don't judge or assign blame. Don't focus on negatives. Don't thoughtlessly follow theories. Don't focus on the past. Don't ask leading or solution-oriented questions. And don't contribute to the conflict by fueling animosities. Next. So, from interest to options. It can be very helpful to remember that sometimes in order to get to our destination, we need to slow down to move fast. Don't seek options until interests are fully explored. Brainstorm options, all kinds of options. Consider and evaluate your options, and then set your timeline for reaching an agreement. You can't create a well-structured agreement with your family on any matter if you haven't first determined everyone's interests. Consider blue skying. Blue skying is where everyone is encouraged to come up with ideas, any ideas, which would address interests that have been expressed. They're encouraged to set aside judgment and leave the bounds of reality. Encouraged to suggest options as if anything were possible and everything is on the table. What options might work? What information or research is needed? What next steps might you want to take? Look at all the options. What might work? What interests they meet? What benefits might each option offer? What risks would each involve? When confronting a complex and long-standing dispute, your family or your client is unlikely to reach a full agreement in 1 or 2 conversations. Even when interests and options have been fully fleshed out, creating solutions often means agreeing to do some homework and setting a timetable for reporting back. Once a plan is in place, it's important to make an agreement about when and how to reassess, to set a date and a time, and to assure that you're following each of the goals that you set and holding everyone involved accountable. Advance. When we get stuck, there are some common barriers that have to be overcome. Lack of trust, different perceptions of fairness, multiple issues, poor communication, geographic dispersions, entrenched patterns, current family relationships, wealth disparities, styles of dealing with conflict, personality changes, complicated role reversals, passivity, relying on faulty assumptions, historical impasses, and emotional triggers in their responses. There are so many potential barriers to successful collaboration. Some situations could require significant time, professional help, or additional resources to be involved. Next. General strategies for any barrier. So let me tell you about these. Try a little humor. Properly used, humor can do a bunch of wonderful things. Injecting a little humor into a potentially tense meeting can quickly change the tone and help relieve tension. Take a walk in her shoes. Showing empathy and compassion can make all the difference when you are at an impasse. Showing that you care about each other and are emotionally mature enough to convey a sense of shared suffering can be just what is needed to reawaken the dialogue. Separate the person from the dialogue. Negotiations involve people, and people are not perfect. We tend to see the world from our own point of view. We also are not always the best communicators, and most of us are not particularly good listeners. Focus on building relationships and facing the problem, not the people. Remember optimism. Capture each success to build momentum and celebrate it. Break bread together. Try to include a meal in your family meeting plan. A meal built around classic family recipes can work wonders, or if that's not possible or appropriate, food from a favorite takeout restaurant. Have snacks and beverages on hand, and don't overlook preferences of those within the group. And consider the alternatives. Be certain all of you have considered alternatives available to you if your negotiations break down. So, next page, next slide. No, go back one. Okay, go forward and go one more. There we go. Well, let me just go ahead with mine because we're not quite together with where we're supposed to be, but I don't want to waste time. I think you've got the one that I took some slides out. So go past that and stay there. Dispute resolution alternatives. When families can't do it themselves, and unfortunately, there are times when there's nothing you can do, whether you're a family member, whether you're a caregiver, whatever your role. So there are some things you can consider. Mediation, conflict coaching, binding arbitration, and litigation. When meetings involving the elder, children, caregivers, and other elders designed to resolve the dispute don't work, try one of those four. Mediation. Mediation is assisted negotiation where the neutral third party, the mediator, helps his or her clients reach a mutually agreeable resolution. It is a voluntary and confidential process that allows the parties to maintain their privacy. Nobody imposes a decision on any party. All of the parties maintain control of the outcome. Mediators don't tell the parties what to do and don't say what is right or wrong. Rather, they help the parties think about their interests and encourage them to be creative and to consider all of the possible options. Mediators around the world are guided by 5 principles: confidentiality, neutrality of the mediator or mediators, voluntary participation by everyone, informed consent by all parties, and upholding of self-determination, including lack of coercion for all the parties. Conflict coaching. A conflict coach is a specialist in conflict resolution theory and practice. The coach helps an individual client to identify his or her interest and develop strategies for working with others involved in a conflict. They're particularly useful when not all parties want to participate in mediation. Conflict coaches work privately with individual clients to help them broaden the options available to them and their families. The goal, help create mutually acceptable solutions. The process involves helping the client identify and prioritize goals and concerns, wants and needs, values and perceptions, and consider wants and needs of their family members or others involved in the dispute. Binding arbitration. Arbitration functions like a judge. Hears all the sides of a conflict, the judge does, or the panel, renders a decision on what should be done. It's less expensive and time-consuming than litigation, but the decision made by the arbitrator or arbitration panel is binding, and the parties give up control of the outcome. And unfortunately, litigation, sometimes it's the only option, and you hate when that comes, but if it does, it always is available. The one thing that often helps the most with conflicts is known as 5 wishes. Many of you may know about this, but I'll quickly go over it. It allows the individual to make certain the person I want to make decisions for me is known when I can't be there. The kind of medical treatment I want or don't want is written. How comfortable I want to be is written. How I want people to treat me is written. And what I want my loved ones to know is written. 5 Wishes is the first living will that talks about your personal, emotional, and spiritual needs as well as your medical wishes. It lets you talk with your family, friends, and doctor about how you want to be treated if you become seriously ill. Family members will not have to guess what you want. It protects them if you become seriously ill because they won't have to make hard choices without knowing your wishes. You can know what your mom, dad, spouse, or friend wants. You can be there for them when they need you most, and you will understand what they really want. 5 Wishes is available for anyone 18 or older, married, single, parents, adult children, and friends. More than 20 million people of all ages have already used it. Because it works so well, lawyers, doctors, hospitals and hospices, faith communities, employers, and retiree groups are handing out the 5 Wishes document. It's available in the District of Columbia and in 42 states that have accepted it, and Georgia is one of those 42 states. So including the elder's voice, maybe it's the most important thing we can talk about today. Make certain the elder's voice is heard in any decision-making process that will impact the elder and his or her happiness, comfort, finances, health, or legacy. So there are some principles that go with elder's voice. There are 8 that I'd like to quickly tell you about. The first, consider creating room for participation even if there is diminished capacity from a medical or legal perspective. Seek to maximize everyone's capacity to participate while doing no harm. 2, while legal competence is decided by a court, in real life, you may find yourself in a position where you need to assess someone's capacity to appropriately participate in a decision-making process. Get a sense of the person's understanding of the problem, of how good their memory is, their reasoning. Are they able to follow a conversation and respond to that person about the issue under consideration? Remember, the right to make a bad decision has been upheld in many states, and it is not necessarily a sign of incompetence. Assume capacity first. 3, consider the kind of process you and your family are in, negotiation or a conversation. Capacity to make an agreement is different from the capacity to have a conversation. 4, to maximize the capacity to participate, ask all family members if any accommodations would be helpful. 5, you may consider a partial presence. The elder participates in some conversations, but not in others. 6, be open and transparent. 7, recognize your own biases about your aging parents or your client. And 8, honor your parents' culture around decision-making. So that brings us to our last slide. If you'll advance. Can you advance that slide?
I have moved on at the end of my data set. Let me go back to the last one that you...
Okay, I'll just do the closing one. That's all right. So I want to thank you for your time and attendance today. And I want to leave you with one last quote from Maya Angelou, who said, and one of my absolute favorite quotes of all time, one that I've adopted as one of my greatest life's mottos, life loves to be taken by the lapel and told, I'm with you, kid. Let's go. And so it is with each of you as you seek in often very difficult situations to bring peace, safety, and love to those you care about and to those who watch and worry as elders become more frail and more fragile. So that ends our 3 webinars. I have very much enjoyed spending time with you, and I hope that these have been helpful to you. So if you have questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, we're done.
The conference has been unmuted.
Are there questions? Well, don't be shy, because I know that this is a hot topic, and I've already unmuted your lines if you have any questions. If you'll do me a favor, Catherine, if you will share your contact information. I know these are very private concerns that folks have, and they may want to talk with you offline.
All right. My email is Catherine, Catherine, .Futch, Futch, all little letters, @gmail.com. And my cell phone is 404-309-5709.
So there is a question, and this, if you would be willing to share the name of the book.
Yes, I'm writing it in for them now. It's Mom Always Liked You Best. And the last names of the authors to save time are, you, Vest, CUI for Resolving Family, FEUD, Fuse, by KARDASIS LARSEN Larson and THORVE.
And so it's Mom Always Liked You, Guide for Resolving Family Issues by Cardasis.
Mom Always Liked You. Yeah, Cardasis, Larson, and Thorpe.
Super. Any other questions? Well, thank you, everyone. I mentioned earlier that we know that are sleep deprived, so we want to make sure today and hope that information is valuable. Have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thank you.